Two Forks Tower.
Hello? Whoever this is?
It's Henry, right?
Yeah.
I'm Delilah.
Yeah, that's what the guy said on the phone. Good night.
Welcome to the job.
Often when people think of games that are considered masterpieces, they often think of Red Dead Redemption 2, BioShock, or The Witcher 3. Maybe even games like Modern Warfare 2. But no one considers a stupid indie game like Firewatch a masterpiece, right? Well, that's exactly why I wanted to make this video. My personal masterpieces are different from what the general conception is. Alan Wake is a masterpiece in my eyes. Doom 2016 is also in that category in terms of why I personally think of it. I saw Firewatch was leaving Game Pass, so I decided to play it. Expecting a stupid game where the goal is to just take out fires in a forest. What I got on the end though is what made me need to make this video. So with a slew of 5-star reviews on Xbox, let's get into why Firewatch is a hidden masterpiece. Firewatch is an incredibly enjoyable playthrough. What starts as somewhat of a slow game quickly becomes something impossible to put down. I started this game at 11 PM one night and stayed up until 7 AM playing it all in one sitting. I played the game from start to finish 3 times within a week. The first time was for my own amusement, having been very interested in it, seeing it was leaving Game Pass, and I figured, why not? Then the second time was when I recorded the footage for this video, and then the third was on my PlayStation 5 because I saw it was on sale. After I finished Firewatch the first time around, I felt as if I needed more, and so with the sequel never coming out, with the creator of the game, Campo Santo, basically confirming that this story is done. I wanted more out of the game, so I played it again, mainly for this video, but also for my amusement. And then I decided to get all the achievements as well. Achievement hunting isn't something I typically do, but I had to for this game. The only other games I've 100%ed in terms of achievements are Far Cry New Dawn and a couple other random small games. The only thing about Firewatch that I don't like though, is that by the end, you want more of it. Playing a video game and wanting more from the world is a feeling that I've never really had before. When completing BioShock, I was very satisfied with the ending. But when I finished Firewatch, I was like, that's it? And that's not a bad thing, which I'll talk about more later. I guess the best way to sum up the ending without giving any context is a whimper instead of a bang. The game is visually stunning, with there being multiple parts where I just stood there looking at the sunset or the far mountains. The graphics may be a turnoff to some people, but I will always say, and I'm willing to die on this hill, that the story and how fun the game is far more important than graphics, which is something games and game developers specifically need to realize. The graphics are perfect for this game. I feel like if it looked super realistic or super clean like Dying Light or Far Cry 6 even, or any other outstanding looking game like Red Dead Redemption 2, it wouldn't feel the same. And also if it looks like the gameplay is frozen while you're watching it, it's not. You can play with subtitles on, but I personally feel like it somewhat ruins the immersion, so I played it without the subtitles. Before beginning the writing process, I looked up Firewatch retrospectives and there aren't many. There's a good handful that are around 10 minutes or so, or not many views. And I would just like to preference, I'm aware this video isn't going to blow up or anything. I simply just wanted to make a video on a video game that I love, and I'm aware it's not going to get many views. Out of the very few retrospectives for Firewatch, I watched these two specifically. I actually watched them while writing the video. And after this video, if you enjoyed it, I highly recommend watching those two as well. And by the way, this isn't going to be as long as either of those, but I am going to be going over the story. But I do just want to say, if you haven't ever heard of this game, I highly recommend experiencing the story for yourself. In my Telltale Walking Dead Season 2 video, I mentioned how I wouldn't be doing a full-fledged retrospective including the story for a while, but this game is one that truly deserves it. The story is the best, and I would argue the best thing about this game. That doesn't mean the gameplay, the characters, or dialogue, or even the layout of the map is bad. In fact, everything about this game is nearly perfect. The overall gameplay is incredibly simple with only a few main mechanics. The walkie-talkie, which is an on-running feature until the very end. The item caches that can be used to update your map and get other random things. I actually really like how the map and compass work in this game. There isn't a marker on the screen telling you where to go. It's up to you to figure it out. The sound design in Firewatch is one of my favorite features in the entire game. Walking through the woods and hearing the birds chirping and the wind blowing is so calming, especially because of how quickly intense it gets. The voice acting alone is outstanding, but every bit of audio is so amazingly done. Rich Sommer and Cissy Jones do perfect performances for Henry and Delilah. Fun fact, Cissy Jones voiced Katja in The Walking Dead Season 1. They both have many more roles under their belts, but their best role, in my honest opinion, is Firewatch. Henry and Delilah act as normal people, like I said. Throughout the whole game, they never use any strong or brave words, they simply talk to one another. People often say how this game is just a therapy session for the characters, and that's completely true. It takes several days in-game for Delilah to become open to Henry about why she took the job in the first place. At the beginning of the game, Delilah tries to pry Henry open bit after bit, with him later relying on her as a main output for his feelings. They are able to just let out all this frustration while talking to each other. On the surface, the game looks like a really boring rinse and repeat game, however that is far from the truth. Finally, before I talk about the story, I want to talk about the ending without giving away any spoilers, mainly because it is pretty controversial. Many find it disappointing or at least lackluster. I personally don't think so, but I also want to say that sometimes when playing games multiple times, the ending gives you different feelings, given the fact that you already played it. But for me, no matter how many times I play Firewatch, the ending still sends that feeling of wanting more. I talk about the feeling earlier on, and it may seem like a bad thing, but honestly, I believe in terms of Firewatch, it isn't. The game ends at the perfect time. It doesn't add a bunch of random scenes just to drag out the runtime. Dying Light 2 is a game that I truly love. I had so much fun playing it. But there are a lot of missions in that game that are completely pointless to the story. So with all that out of the way, I'm going to be tackling the best part of the game, the story. The game begins with a really well done introduction that introduces you to Henry, the main character. It gets you all caught up on why he decided to take the job as a lookout. This can be incredibly misleading at first. It's only the first 10 minutes or so, but it's a really welcomed addition. It inserts quick moments of gameplay to show you his way to the lookout tower. It says how you and Julia met, you guys got a dog, the conversation of married and kids comes up, and then comes the big stinger. Julia has been having fits of rage and forgetfulness. Turns out she has early onset dementia. Over time it gets worse and worse as Henry decides she should live with her parents. Through all the anger and depression, Henry picks up the job as a lookout for the Shoshone National Forest. Henry makes it to the bottom of the hill and walks up to his lookout tower. Once inside, he turns on the generator and picks up the radio, responding to a woman on the other end. Very quickly, we learn that her name is Delilah, and she's the voice we'll be hearing throughout the entire game. Day 1 rolls around and Delilah is telling you about the firefinder in the center of the lookout tower. Her attention gets drawn away, though, from fireworks being launched in the distance. With it being illegal and a massive fire hazard, she sends Henry down to handle it. This is where the game officially begins, in my opinion. Up to this point, the game was relatively linear, a very slow and nice opening with only a few small bits of control. Walking out of the lookout tower means your ability to wander around has officially been unlocked. Walking through the forest, you come upon your first cache box. Inside these boxes are typically small clues relating to the story, a map to copy the information, and notes written between two men, Ron and Dave, which comes up quite a bit in the game. Delilah tells us that the code for all the boxes is 1, 2, 3, 4, which is very helpful. Also out of the cache box you get a rope that will be used to get down a mountain. Henry attaches the rope to a cliff as he begins to rappel down. The rope ends up snapping though and he falls straight to the ground. Once Henry reaches the meadow, you see a campfire, empty beer cans, and most importantly, the fireworks. You can either confiscate them or leave them be. I chose to confiscate them to prevent anyone else using them. You follow a track of clothes and bras and stuff until you reach Jonesy Lake to see two naked women on the middle island. And this is a gorgeous set piece. No, it's not the women, it's the sky. With the sun setting, this goes to show how truly amazing and beautiful this game looks. After dealing with them, you inform Delilah that your previous way of getting back to the lookout tower was a no-go. She tells you to go through Thunder Canyon, and this is the only time in the entire game that you can hear thunder. In the process of going through the canyon, you come across another cache box and a cave. When you go in, you see a locked-off gate. When asking Delilah about it, she basically says it's locked to prevent people going in there and dying. Makes sense. When walking out of the cave and up the hill, a strange figure appears holding a flashlight directly in your face. He runs away, and after a few moments and asking Delilah about it, she will make fun of you, saying it's normal to come across strangers in the woods. You make it back to your lookout tower, but something's wrong. Henry's typewriter is laying on the ground. When alerting Delilah about this, she claims she didn't see anyone up there. Walking up the stairs, it's revealed that your lookout tower had been broken into. And with there being many suspicious characters up to this point, you don't really know who did it. It's day 2 now, and Henry's sitting at his desk when Delilah calls him. The thing about the dialogue between them is so realistic. They talk like two human beings. There's never a point where they sound wooden or reading straight off a script. Him sitting at the desk while sipping some coffee and looking out of the window is what most people, including myself, would probably do in this scenario. Anyways, Delilah tells you what your task is for today, and it's to reach the downed wire from the storm the night before. I actually forgot to include this in the original recording of it, so here we go. While walking towards the wire, she actually gets a call from someone, and this is a super weird part. She mentions how Henry doesn't know about something or whatever is going on. When I first experienced this part, it sent genuine chills down my spine. It felt so sudden, and it's the only time she ever talks to anyone else throughout the entire game. While wandering around, you can find an old outhouse with an old burnt down cabin just past it. When asking about the cabin, Delilah doesn't say anything, adding more suspicion to the fire. Pun intended. Henry climbs up a hill and sees the wire down, but after some more inspection, the wire was cut by a human being. There's a trail of beer cans and Delilah tells you to follow it. Walking down the path takes you to a log that crosses over a drop. Henry finds a tree that has a backpack hanging on it from one of the branches. After knocking it down, it's revealed it once belonged to someone named Brian Goodwin. In his backpack, you find some more sturdy rope so you can access more areas. Delilah talks about Brian and how he was a 12-year-old boy who had an a-hole father. After opening another cash box, Henry makes it towards a plum of smoke, which, by the way, the cash box is optional. Should probably preference that. On the way there, he walks through a controlled burn area. After walking some more, you come upon a canyon crossover. I will never get over how stunning this game is. You eventually find yourself back in the woods area as Henry comes across a medicine wheel. I had no idea what this was at first when I played this, and I actually thought it was a satanic symbol. When Henry reaches the lush woods, you open a cash box that has a missing persons case inside. This doesn't really go anywhere, unfortunately, but Delilah does mention how more people go missing than she'd like to admit. After walking through the woods, it leads you to a stream that takes you to a waterfall, and once again, this game is just breathtaking. You see a piece of clothing hanging on a tree. Henry then finds the campsite of the girls, with it seeming as if they just left. Beers are still there on the ground, and the campfire is still smoldering. Their tent, however, is completely destroyed. The piece of cloth on the tree is the chunk of the tent that had been ripped off. There's a note that appears to be addressed towards Henry, but it could really be anyone at this point. This is what Firewatch does so perfectly. Every time something else happens in the story, it makes you wonder what it could be. It just keeps building up to the eventual conclusion. Day 3 starts with Henry boarding up his broken window. Henry and Delilah have a really nice conversation, and she asks you what you look like because she's drawing you. She asks if you're ready to work, and answering yes, we get our first big time jump of the game, with it being day 9. Henry's sitting on the canyon crossover eating food, and this is really just a gorgeous set piece. She ends up telling you that 2 women, Chelsea Stevens and Lily McLean, went missing, assuming they were the 2 ones at the lake. And now with that missing persons case, things just continue to get weird. It skips to day 15, and this is something a lot of people often mention. The first hour or so is relatively slow. Days 1 and 2 are jam-packed with fun little bits of dialogue and getting to explore the area. Then once day 3 rolls around, the game just starts going very fast and it doesn't stop. To add to that point, day 15 contains Henry and Julia talking over the radio. Then it cuts to day 33. Henry is sent to reach a supply drop to retrieve his food. Walking there is super nice and relaxing with nothing ever really happening. You get to the supply drop cache and get your food as it cuts to day 64. Henry goes out on the balcony as Delilah talks to him over the radio. They talk about the fire, and this is where it gets a little awkward. She's very clearly drunk and she keeps trying to flirt with Henry. She insinuates things like, adult exercise, which is really weird because I was actually rooting for Henry and Delilah to get together in my first playthrough. But Henry still has a wife that probably doesn't even know who he is anymore though. So either way, it's a sad turnout. The game kind of forces you to respond like that though. When Delilah says she wished she was with you, your only responses are me too or just silence. Henry asks what they would be doing if she was over there, and then she follows that up with, let me tell you. And then it skips to day 76. Henry's walking to Jonesy Lake to fish. When he gets there, he notices something on a rock. It's a clipboard that has all the dialogue between both Henry and Delilah. After an alarmed Henry and Delilah talk about it, there's a strange sound in the distance. At first I thought it was an elk, as they have a very high-pitched scream. Walking for a few steps reveals it's a radio laying on the ground. Henry picks it up and hears twigs snapping behind him before being knocked out. He informs Delilah of what just happened as he mentions Wapiti Station that was on the clipboard. Henry makes the way to the meadow and comes across a massive fenced-off area of the park. From this point out, the story is nothing but incredible. After not being able to get into a fence, she tells you to go to an area that had recently been a controlled burn, because firefighters might still be there. When walking, you see snowmobiles that have been torn apart. The engines are completely gone, and they look like they've been there a while. Henry makes it to the camp as the bridge is out. Once getting across the ravine and walking through the path, the firefighters are gone. Henry finds a paper to reveal that there are experiments going on. And at this point, the theory is that Delilah and Henry are being studied on to determine how 2 complete strangers bond over time with no outside interaction. We find an axe though, which gives us the ability to break through blocked off paths and chop down trees. When you're heading back to your lookout tower, Henry and Delilah are talking over the radio as a mysterious man's voice intercepts the frequency. The fear in Delilah's voice is very believable, as a performance.
Alright, so, tell me what you think of this. Did you just cough?
No. Did you just cough?
No.
Oh,
Oh,
fuck.
fuck.
It cuts to day 77 as Henry is calling Thoroughfare Tower, also known as Delilah's Tower. She tells Henry to take a look at the Shoshone Wilderness poster as you get your next destination, Cottonwood Creek. After making it to Cottonwood Creek and finding the cache box that Delilah had set up, we get a brand new untouched radio in the box. This allows you to talk about everything that's been going on without fear of being traced. Right here is actually where the sound design reaches its highest point ever in the game. While going there, you could constantly hear what sounds like someone running in the bushes behind you. It could just be the wind, but that specific sound only ever shows up in this section. Delilah tells Henry that she filed a report for the 2 missing girls. However, she reveals that she said her and Henry had no interaction with them, making the situation far more stressful for them and the player at this point. That is something this game does so well. As you proceed further into the game, you feel the stress that Henry and Delilah are currently under. After that, next up is breaking into Wapiti Station. Using the axe to break down the gate, we can finally get a little bit farther into the truth. Following the path reveals a small monitoring tower. Going farther though reveals a whole entire station with multiple high-end equipment, a tent, and some documents discussing both Henry and Delilah. You find a tracker that picks up a signal within the tent. When finding it, it's simply just called the black box. No indication of what it is, and I don't think it ever does tell you that. Uncovering all the papers reveals a binder with subjects Henry M and Delilah A written on the cover. There are documents about both of them. However, though, the weird thing is that there are documents in there containing little facts that neither of them told each other. Delilah suggests they should burn it all to the ground, and right here it doesn't matter what option you choose, Henry ends up refusing either way. But as you're making your way back to your lookout tower, Henry turns around to see the tent and everything around fully engulfed in flame. Day 77 begins with Henry in his tower talking to Delilah as the wave receiver begins beeping. Following the signal takes you to a random backpack on a tree. Attached to the bag is a key that has 452 on it. Taking it off the branch causes an alarm to go off, which Henry quickly smashes with the axe. Delilah mentions how Henry should kick back and relax now that he's back in his lookout tower, but he's not. Henry rushes back to the lookout tower to reveal a cassette tape had been taped to his door. On it is audio of Delilah saying, "Burn it all down," meaning if the police ever get a hold of it, she could lose her job or even get arrested for arson. Henry's standing at the window watching the fire build more and more while also listening to the tape. Now time for the final main objective of the game, exploring the cave. This is probably my favorite section of the entire game, to be honest. Once Henry is in the cave, he opens the door. Not long afterwards, the door slams shut behind him.
What the hell?
He is able to find another way out and informs Delilah of what had happened. He comes upon a fort-like area that was decorated to be like a castle. Inside, Henry finds a bunch of school notebooks, diagrams, and even a Game Boy-like toy. It's revealed that it was all done by Brian Goodwin, the 12-year-old boy who we found in the backpack earlier on and Delilah had mentioned. Underneath the sign, we find some anchors that are used for climbing later on. While trying to find another way into the cave, Delilah informs Henry that the two girls were found safely, which is one less thing on their plate. Once Henry's back in the cave, he uses the anchors and rappels lower into the cave. This part is honestly amazing, and I know I've mentioned that a lot, and I know I've mentioned sound a lot, but the sound design of this part is truly amazing. Going further into the cave, we see a figure in the distance. Getting closer, it's revealed that it's a body. It's Brian Goodwin. It appears his rope snapped while climbing as he fell down a massive shaft. Henry gets out of the cave and informs Delilah of the body. They have a really sad conversation where Delilah tells Henry to pack his stuff up as they're leaving in the morning. Henry begins day 79, the final day, by packing his stuff. Seeing pack your belongings on screen really just hits for me. It's basically letting you know that this adventure that you went on is coming to an end. Seeing the smoke-filled air with the planes going over is just a gorgeous moment in the game. You can't entirely see the planes, all you see is the silhouettes of them, but the sound design of them flying over is so good. While talking to Delilah, the wave receiver ends up beeping again. Following the wave receiver takes you to a cassette tape taped to a rock and a rope going upwards. Henry plays the tape and reveals that it's a strange man who had recorded it. He mentions the reason he did everything he did. Henry climbs the rope and comes upon his own lookout. The man was Ned Goodwin, Brian's father. He talks about the climbing accident and why he avoided it entirely. He thought of contacting the police but figured he would be suspect number one, which you typically are in those situations. He had a spot that could overlook both Henry and Delilah's tower. When walking up to his view, it's simply just called Goodwin's View. After the tape ends, he informs Delilah about it. She tells him to just get to the evacuation point located at Delilah's tower. She says she's going to leave early, but Henry asks her to stay and she agrees. Once you reach her tower, hopefully getting to meet her for the first time, she's not there. She left early. They have one final conversation as they both say goodbye to one another, and the game ends with Henry boarding the evacuation helicopter and leaving the Shoshone Forest. What a game. Now, really quickly before I get onto the outro, I want to talk about the most controversial part of the entire game, that ending. You would think that the game would culminate with Henry and Delilah finally meeting in person after all they've been through. But that doesn't happen. If you ask her to stay, she says she will, but when you get there, she's nowhere to be seen. A lot of people see this ending as a whimper instead of a bang. And it is, but earlier I said how the ending doesn't really ruin the game for me. In fact, it makes me love it even more. It would have been insanely cliche if they met and lived a long life. Should they have met? Yes, I think so. Or at least have an ending like Unpacking, another indie game. The game ends with pictures documenting the character's life after the events of the game. But no, it just ends abruptly. Henry gets on the helicopter, roll the credits. Overall, Firewatch truly is a hidden masterpiece. Everything from the way the gameplay meshes perfectly into the world and character progression, even the way the story holds your hand at first before throwing you into the deep end. And really the way that the events are perfectly laid out in order. Climbing rocks and using the radio can get incredibly boring, but that's what makes it so special. The gameplay doesn't overshadow the story in any way, and that is very important. What I'm going to mention is going to be a really strange analogy, but hear me out on this one. Black Ops 4 Zombies had mostly fun gameplay, but the story was very split, convoluted, and overall confusing. For me personally, the best thing about that game was the gameplay, and now sitting here looking back, that kind of hinders what I think of it. Firewatch has some very repetitive and boring gameplay, but the story makes you want to finish it. Very similar to how Chernobyl was made. The gameplay got boring pretty fast with your typical FPS shooter, but the story was so fantastic. With Chernobyl, once you were 5 to 10 hours in, you had to finish it because of how good the story was. I don't really know what it is about me loving indie games, but Firewatch sits right next to Chernobyl as my favorite indie game of all time. There was a spiritual successor to Firewatch named In the Valley of the Gods in production, but Camposanto hasn't really said anything about it recently, so I don't even know if it's ever gonna happen. I figured I should probably put this little bit in here to clarify. In the process of editing, I did some more research on it, I guess you could say, about the In the Valley of the Gods, and there are multiple reports saying that it was canceled, put on hold. Then there was multiple ones that were saying it was still in development, so there's really no telling when or if it will ever come out, which is honestly really sad for me. And also, there's apparently a movie adaptation in the works as well, which I'm incredibly worried about due to video game movies typically aren't good or even faithful to the source. I started writing this before The Last of Us show came out, and The Last of Us is how every single video game adaptation should be. There are some things I forgot to mention, like the music. Firewatch had a bunch of songs made for it by Chris Nemo. Every song fits with the aesthetic of the game. Soundtracks are very important in games, and this game just nails it. Chernobyl had that slow, eerie music to it. Doom had that hard punching music, and Firewatch just has somber. I managed to get the game on sale for Xbox and PlayStation, but the original price is still fair in my opinion. On its own, the game is $20, and honestly that is 100% worth it. Sure, you only get around 6 to 8 hours of gameplay, and that's even stretching it, but those are some of the most intriguing hours of video games I played all of 2022. Seeing each new clue lead up to the perfect reveal of Ned Goodwin is really well built up. I understand that this game, like many, is not for everyone, but if it ever comes on sale for $5, at least try it out. It's also really easy for achievements and trophies if you care about that. I do, that's why I got all of them. If you were looking for a fun gameplay-based game, then skip out on this. But if you want a really good story with amazing characters, I cannot recommend Firewatch enough. I have a lot going in my life currently that I don't think I should talk about. I'm not going to try to let that get in the way of me making videos. My current plan for the next retrospective is Red Dead Redemption's Undead Nightmare DLC. I'm still getting used to making these, so I personally feel like I improve slightly each time, but that's why, the audio's off a little bit or something like that, because I'm still getting used to it. For the 2 people that maybe made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Bye.